I will call the regular meeting for the Board of Adjustments and Appeal for September 25th, 2019 to order. May we, at this point, please stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, may we have roll call?
Chairman Taylor.
Here.
Vice Chairman Shahab.
Here.
Alternate Member Kilpatrick.
Here.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Very good. We have a four members here, so we do have a quorum for voting. At this point, we look at the approval for the minutes from the July 24th meeting, 2019. Are there any corrections or to be made to the minutes? Did anyone notice? Have a motion then, please.
Yeah, I motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Okay. All persons anticipating speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on a table near the entrance to the council chamber, or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative for either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for this commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. All right, staff, have the two items on the agenda been properly advertised for this evening?
Yes, they have.
Very good. Have any members of this board spoken to anyone in the public or visited the locations in question tonight?
No.
And no. All right, so speaking on that. At this point, we will give our little speech. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to our counselor to say why there's only 4 of us and not 5 of us, and give you the option of continuing on with the 4 of us or waiting till we have a full 5-member board. So, Counselor.
Thank you. This is a 5-member Board of Adjustment and Appeals, and pursuant to this board's bylaws, the section Article 7 on quorum states, for the purpose of transacting business at any regular meeting, adjourned, special, or called meeting, 4 members shall constitute a quorum, and an affirmative vote of 4 members shall be required to pass on any matter, except that an affirmative vote of 3 members shall suffice to pass on a motion to deny a request for a variance. At this point, I'd like to either get a head nod or a verbal affirmation that both parties wish to proceed with the 4-member board. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, very good. So, all right, I got out of order. I'm sorry. Back up. Okay, we have no consent agenda. We have no old business. So we'll go with new business. Our first variance to be heard is 8-2019. It deals with 4460 Capron Road. So staff, will you enlighten us, please?
This variance request number 8-2019 is for 4460 Capron Road to allow a pool to be located 1.5-foot encroachment into a rear yard setback. The code allows pools to be located, the pool edge of a pool itself to be only 8 feet from a rear yard setback. The applicant was informed when she was inquiring to get a permit for another structure she asked the city council or the staff whether she needed to get a permit for the pool that was placed on her property in the rear, and she was informed that she did need to get one. So this is an after-the-fact issue. She did subsequently submit an application for a permit to have that there installed, and so it's in process and review right now, and part of that process required her to go through this variance because it was discovered that where the pool was located and placed, it encroaches about 1.5 feet into that rear yard setback, that 8-foot setback for pools. This setback for pools is different from buildings. The building has a different setback requirement, so accessory structures such as a pool has its own setback requirement. And I'll explain in a moment what that is. The agenda item begins on page 11 of your packet. That's the cover sheet there. The request is specifically to section 28-391 of the code entitled Residential Accessory Buildings and Structures. And so the variance request is to allow 1.5-foot encroachment into a required 8-foot pool setback specifically. The staff report begins on page 13 of your packet, and I'll summarize that. The applicant is Miss Lenogan, and she owns the property at 4460 Capron Road. The property has a comprehensive plan future land use of residential medium, which allows 10 units per acre. Currently, there's only one single-family home on this property. The zoning on the property is R1C, that is single-family high density, and all of the surrounding properties there are also R1C with the exception of a piece of property to the east across the street on Capron, which has a light industrial services and warehousing M1 zoning. The parcel is rectangular in shape and meets the R1C frontage and area requirements. Again, the property has a single-family detached home with accessory structures located on the property, and that is consistent with the zoning. I'll briefly describe the criteria for your review. I won't repeat that again with the next agenda item. So as part of each variance request, you're supposed to consider the following criteria per the code. There are special conditions and circumstances which exist that are peculiar to this property. That special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. Granting the variance requested will not confer upon the applicant any special privilege that is denied by others in the same zoning. The literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zoning. The variance granted is the minimum possible that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Granting the variance will preserve the spirit of the ordinance and remain in harmony with its general purpose and intent. In granting the variance, the public safety and welfare must be assured. And in no case shall the granting of a variance result in a change of use, which would not be permitted in that zoning. And that's not the case here. So on page 14 of your packet, that's the staff report, or page 2 of the staff report on the bottom. Now I'll summarize the analysis. The property owner installed an above-ground pool in the rear yard. The owner submitted an after-fact permit, which again is under review. Section specifically 28-391, subparagraph G1 of the Land Development Regulations specifies the setbacks for accessory structures, including pools, in this zoning district. The minimum distance between the edge of a swimming pool and the rear property line is 8 feet. That is the requirement. The code also specifies a 5-foot distance between a pool enclosure and the rear property line. So there are 2 setbacks here. One of them is not in play because she does not have an enclosure. And so typically you'll see a pool that has the edge of the pool is supposed to be 8 feet from the rear property line. And then the enclosure itself, which is a screen enclosure, can be 5 feet from the property line. So that shows a distance there of 3 feet for walking or whatever that might be. But if the pool is further and the enclosure is further away from that rear setback, there's no requirement that there has to be a 3-foot distance requirement between the enclosure and the edge of the pool. This only applies when you go right up to that setback. Again, the applicant is not putting in an enclosure. That's not requested here. The purpose of the 8-foot setback appears to be related to a best practice distance, and this is based on my discussion with the building official. According to the building official, an in-ground pool is typically 8 feet in depth. The 8-foot setback would appear to be related to the typical depth of an in-ground pool. An in-ground pool 8 feet deep could have an adverse impact on an adjacent property if located too close to the property line. So according to him, that appears to be the reason for the 8-foot setback requirement for a pool, which is typically considered to be an in-ground pool. However, in this case, this is an above-ground pool. The setback and the LDRs do not distinguish between an in-ground pool and an above-ground pool. In addition, there is no such distance requirement for an in-ground or above-ground pool in the Florida Building Code, so it's not addressed. That question could not be answered. The owner installed an above-ground pool without an enclosure. The distance between the above-ground pool and the house is 15 feet. There is room for the above-ground pool to be relocated closer to the house and therefore outside of the 8-foot rear yard setback. However, the applicant is asking for that pool where she located it to remain where it is with the 1.5-foot encroachment into that rear yard setback. Staff recommends denial of the variance due to the ability to relocate the above-ground pool outside of the 8-foot setback. Relocating the above-ground pool 1.5 feet to the east, or shifting it to the east, can be accomplished without a variance. The variance is not the minimum necessary to make possible reasonable use of the property, and the literal interpretation of the code will not deprive the owner of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zoning district. However, if the board is inclined to approve the variance, staff does not believe that the public safety and welfare will be impacted. The above-ground pool is currently 6.5 feet from the rear property line. I'll refer you to the application, which is on page 16 of your packet. The applicant provided some responses on page 18 of your packet, which is a part of the application, to some of the questions that are part of the standard application, such as, why are you unable to comply with the requirements? And she provided an answer here. The swimming pool is set up and in the ground partially and not movable. A fourth criteria or question that we asked in our application, explain why approval of your variance request would not likely result in harm to your neighbor's properties or to the general public. It's private and an enclosed backyard. That was her answer here. The application is complete. There is a Brevard County property appraiser record on page 21 of your packet. The survey of the property is on page 23 of your packet, and you can see that the above-ground pool is delineated there in the rear yard. And you can see the distance between the edge of that pool and the back screen porch, which is attached to the house, which is about 15 feet. So that's why we stated that recommended denial, because we thought that the pool could be shifted further closer to the house and thereby be located outside that setback. On page 24 of your packet, you'll see the zoning map. Again, the property is zoned single-family R1C. We did include a few photographs. I did visit Ms. Lanogan, at the site, and you'll see on page 25, 26, and 27 of your packet some images that we took. Page 26, you'll see the image that I took of the distance, the area between the fence and the pool. I did include sections of the code that are relevant to this question. Page 28 of your packet highlighted the section 28-391G1, and I highlighted it there. There's the standard right there. R1C, pools are supposed to be 8 feet from the property line in the rear. That concludes my presentation. With that, I'll try to answer any questions you have. And the applicant is also here to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions of staff from anybody here? Any members?
I have a quick question for you. Brad, just the setback, to the property line, is that from the edge of the pool? And what do you consider the edge of the pool?
I guess the edge of the wall, from the outside of the wall to the pool. So if there's I think, so we rely on the survey that's provided to us primarily, and that shows us 6.5 feet. So however the survey measures that, if that's from I would assume that's from the wall of the pool itself to the edge of the fence.
Yeah, the thought is, when you have a ground pool, you measure the setback, not to the deck, to the actual side of the pool on the inside water of the pool. So this one here looks like they have some kind of a, siding that's almost about 8 inches. So that 8 inches could be added to the setback. If you are in-ground pool, you're going to the water's edge. With this one here, you would have probably less than 1.5 feet. So your setback, although the surveyor did it really to the face of to the outside of the pool, but he should have done it to the inside of the pool. So just to look at it closer.
That is certainly possible.
Okay.
We could clarify that, but we'd have to go back to you with that information.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Just, the other thing is, did water utilities shed any light on this?
We did, with every variance application, we provide that to several departments. We didn't receive any comments from them.
Because that's a big question for the water department, because that's like a big hardship on somebody just emptying a pool. About 15,000 gallons of water is going to be lost. And I would say that would be a problem to the water department to lose that amount of water. It's fresh water coming in from the city. And it's above ground pool, and I'm not sure what the depth is, but the building department is saying the 8 feet came in from 8-foot depth pool, right? 8-foot deep pool is, this one here is not 8 feet deep. And, I don't think it would, with the 8 feet, I don't think it would interfere with the property line if they have to, something is wrong with the pool. It's not a deep pool. That's my thinking.
Okay. Any other questions from staff before we open the public? Okay. At this time, we'll open up to the public, and our first card.
Michael West.
Yes, sir. If you would come up and give us your name and address for the record.
Good
And
evening, sir. Michael West, 4460 Capron Road, Titusville, Florida, 32780. Thank you for letting us come before you tonight. She wanted a pool in her backyard. Her son, she was going to go to Walmart and buy a pool. So her son bought a pool for her. So she had it put in, and then she said her son was going to put in a privacy fence and a deck around the pool. So she went to the city and said, hey, I need to get a permit for my deck and a fence. And while she was there, she said, hey, do you need a permit to get a above ground pool? And they said, yes, you do. And she didn't know that. So she went back down and she started the process immediately. And then everybody came out and they did this and did that. And we can move the pool, but the water and digging everything up and having it moved, I think it's 8 inches. That's what it is. So we found out that we can put a deck around the pool, and it's like 5 inches away from the property line. The rear property where the pool is and the next door neighbors, they wrote letters saying they don't have a problem with the pool being there, and they're both notarized. So, you know what they say about ignorance is bliss? That's where we stand.
I noticed by the plat, that this does not back up directly to a neighbor. Your neighbor's lot is very long, and basically it's just a shed that he has in the back. So
Yes,
you're
sir.
not really there interfering with anyone else.
Right. There's a shed, but it's on the other
Yeah,
side.
it's on the other side.
Yes, sir.
Their house is more the other street up close.
Yes, sir.
Did you submit those copies to the board yet or anything? Because we don't have them in our,
No, sir, I didn't. I can.
yeah, you will need to turn them in since you mentioned it and you had copies.
Okay,
So
okay. How do I do
if we
that?
could just hand them to us.
Yes, sir.
Just for us to glance at them to see if the addresses that you have on there, who signed it and see.
Mr. Chairman, I did receive one phone call from one neighbor who expressed she did not have any concern with the request when she received a notice from us.
Okay. So these are both off Pritchard, which is the other street. Okay. Does anyone else have a question to ask this witness?
Sir, do you need a copy of these letters back?
No, ma'am.
We're going to enter them into the record as part of
Thank
this
you.
item. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Well, what is it the depth like it shows on the side?
52 inches.
Oh, okay, it's just 52
Yes, sir.
inches on the depth, so it's not really sunk down, way down in the ground. It's just full of water. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Oh, or pass it on down. You didn't get to see them, but both of them on Pritchett. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
up. And do we have any other cards to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, then we'll close the public hearing part and bring it back for discussion here amongst us, and follow-up questions. I, just speaking for myself, if it were a house right behind it, I'd have a problem.
Yeah.
But I don't see a house, and there won't be a house the way the subdivision's laid out. So I personally have nothing wrong with a couple of 8 inches or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, my feeling is pretty much the same. And were this a permanent structure, I realize you intend to use it for quite some time, but nonetheless, it's still not exactly a permanent structure.
No, it can be removed,
And
right?
so any variance requested, and at least in my view of the matter, would run only to the extent that this is in use and at this location. And then it would sunset once this was removed. Is that pretty much consistent with what everyone feels on that?
Okay.
I got to say, from my standpoint, as far as justifying what hardship may exist on this, I think Sid had mentioned, multiple thousand gallons of water, and it also appears that some pump structures and some other things would have to be relocated and some PVC replumbed. Admittedly, the applicants, it would have been much easier had you known in advance that a permit was required. You perhaps wouldn't be here had that been the case. But
I wouldn't have thought above ground pool needed.
no, actually, the truth of the matter is that would not have occurred to me as well. So
See no evil, hear no evil.
Member Johnson, if you are inclined to make a motion specific to the existing above-ground pool that was constructed in 2019, I'd ask that you specify that your motion clarify that the variance is specific only to that.
All right. Any other questions, staff? We're all ready to go? All right, do I have a motion then, sir? Or anyone?
yes, I'll make a motion to approve variance number 7 dash. Is it 29?
No, that's the other
I'm at the
one.
wrong one.
You're at the wrong one. I'm
I've
sorry.
gone too far here. Let me get back to it.
Page,
It's number 8.
page 8.
No, variance number 8-2019.
Way too far here.
Page 16, 13, page 13.
Page 13, I'll get it.
Shows you the beginning of the application.
I still missed it.
You're on 13, you're on 3.
Yeah, I could explain it.
Keep going, you're not there. 1, 2 more.
Cool.
Oh, there it is, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So I make a motion to approve variance 8-219 for a 1.5-foot or less variance on the side setback, with the rationale that the hardship involved would be relocation of plumbing, PVC fixtures, as well as probably multiple thousand gallons of water. And the other proviso I would add to the variance is that it only run with the extent to which this above-ground pool is, this exact one is in place. So were this structure to ever be removed, this variance would sunset.
Mr. Johnson,
Does that make sense, staff?
yeah, that, we understand that. I did put in the staff report on page 14 of your packet, the actual building permit number, so we can tie this motion or this approval, if it's approved, variance to that specific permit number. So that's all, so we always know what it's tied to, specifically to this above-ground pool.
Yeah, the BP number 19-002.
Yes, sir.
310. Okay. It's on page 14. Down at the bottom and analysis. See that number right there? Okay. All right. I have a motion. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, may we have roll call, please?
Chairman Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shahan,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Alternate Member Kilpatrick.
Yes.
Congratulations. So.
Thank you very much.
Well, you don't have to run away. You can stay with us. Oh, well, they keep running. Okay, so next up on the hit parade, we have, go to the top, go to the top. We have variance number 7-2019 for 1225, 1227, and 1229, and 1231 of Garden Street. So enlighten us about this huge piece of property.
So variance number 7-2019 for this property on Garden Street is primarily to allow for a building addition to the rear of the building. It has a request to variances to 3 sections of the code, but there are multiple parts to it. So I'll explain as I go through here. But I do want to refer you first, before we go any further, to a drawing on page 49 of the packet.
49. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so this property has 3 public right-of-way frontages. Garden Street is a major arterial. Then you have Grannis Avenue, and you also have Orange Street, which is the back of the property. Both of those streets are considered local streets. This building was built in the 70s, and you can see the building configuration, the building footprint. That's how it was originally put there. And then you can see a parking lot between the building and Garden Street. If you can't hear me, please stop. And then there's also a parking lot between the building and Grannis Avenue. The addition is going to be proposed at the rear of the building facing Orange Street. The applicant is requesting to put in a building addition to house a stairwell at the rear there, at the southwest corner of the building itself. You can see kind of illustrated there, the stairs there. So that will be enclosed with walls, and so that will be a building addition. It will not be an uncovered stairwell. This will be, okay. Or it'll be air-conditioned space, basically, or enclosed space. Could be air-conditioned. The rest of the building footprint in the back there is existing. Those encroachments there, there's a setback requirement that this building right now currently encroaches into with those bump outs. You can see there facing Orange Street. It also has a side yard setback requirement, which obviously doesn't meet there on the interior side of the property. So facing its neighbor, it obviously, the building is obviously located in the side yard setback, and I'll explain what those setbacks are in a moment. So this building, the structure is non-conforming. So it's just basically grandfathered. It's there. It was approved prior to the zoning that was put on this property in 1993. The current zoning on the property is community commercial, that's CC. I'm going to refer you to some images that we took just using Google on page 55 of your packet, 56, 57, 58, 59. So you can see on 55 there, the back, there's a loading dock there at the back of the building. On 59, that is the front of the building, facing the building from Garden Street. On page, I'm sorry, that's page 56, I think. On page 57, you'll see the same picture. It looks like we repeated it there. Page 58, this is looking at the building from Grannis. And then on page 59, this is looking at the building from the intersection of Grannis and Orange Street. Now, that picture on page 59, you'll see on the right-hand side of that picture, this is where the building addition will be located that will expand the building out a little bit right there where you see this little covered area, stair stoop, basically.
So basically, this will be just eliminated and it'll put a stairway where there's already an existing bump out.
Correct. So the primary variance, if I may say, is really for this building addition. But however, there are additional variance requests part of this application that are trying to bring in conformance the bump outs that I explained that are existing as part of the original footprint along Orange Street and along that side as well. I'll explain what I mean in a moment. On page 60, I want to refer you to the code before I get into the staff report. This is the zoning district that's applicable to the property now, community commercial. So you can see the building on the next page that gets into that section about the setbacks. So the front setback is 25 feet. The side corner along Grannis is 15 feet. The interior side is 10 feet, which it does not meet right now. The building encroaches in that. And then the rear yard setback is 25 feet, which the building encroaches into as well. On page 63 of your packet, the property is located inside what's called the downtown mixed-use land use. And in this case, the code applies that land use over this property, which is zoned CC, community commercial, as if it was an overlay. So in section 28-7, which is page 63 of your packet here, it's entitled Additional Requirements for Zoning Districts Consistent with, or rather located underneath, the downtown mixed-use land use. And so it goes into additional criteria here, or flexibility, if you will, depending on the issue, that is applicable to your property along Garden Street here. It's primarily, you see the conditions here, or the standards here, are primarily about the frontage and how it faces Garden Street. There was a question from the applicant about allowing for a 10-foot landscape requirement, because right now, which I'll get into in a moment, there is a 20-foot landscape requirement along any public right-of-way at a minimum. Garden, Grannis, and Orange Street. So there's additional requirement for variance or to encroach into a landscape requirement. But in this section of the code right here, 28.7, paragraph A4, it says, if all required off-street parking can otherwise be accommodated with on-site, the required front and street side setbacks can be substituted with a minimum 10-foot deep landscape buffer area. Within this area, the impervious coverage shall not exceed 300 square feet. The applicant asked if this could be applied in their case, so thereby reducing their required landscape yard from 20 to 10 feet. But we didn't think that was applicable here because there is another application that they just got approved for a conditional use permit to have off-site parking. So we don't see that they can apply or utilize this section of the code to have a reduced landscape yard because not all their parking is on site. So the applicant, Ms. Rosenka, and I have discussed this back and forth, but this is what our interpretation has been. So we believe that this setback, the landscape yard requirement is 20 feet on all sides, Orange Street, Grandis, and Garden Street. But in this case, the variances are really about Orange Street. On page 64 of your packet, you'll see we've included a section of the code that's 30-332. And this is a table that we use that's in the code that tells us what type of buffer, landscape buffer you're supposed to have along your property boundaries, whether it's on a public right-of-way or adjacent to another use. And so in this case, CD stands for commercial development. And you look at the table here and it says you're supposed to use a buffer type B because you're along a public right-of-way. So this will be applicable to Orange Street as well. So then it refers you to another section of the code, and that's on page 65 of your packet. And you can see in this table here, a type B buffer is a 20-foot landscape depth. So that's why we believe that there is a 20-foot landscape requirement even along Orange Street, which is the back of this building. Okay, and then we also included another section on page 67 of your packet. And this is a section related to nonconforming structures. And so it states here in section 34-345, and I'll read here, a structure not in conformance with the regulations shall not be extended, enlarged, or extended where such activity will result in a greater nonconformity with respect to such standards as setback, height, lot coverage, or density. We wanted you to be aware of that because this is a request to add a building addition that will further encroach into a required setback and a required landscape yard where the building already encroaches in there. So you have a nonconformity, and now the applicant's asking for an increasing of that nonconformity. So now I'll go back to the staff report and summarize that real quick and explain our analysis and recommendation. Yes, sir.
Page are you going to?
So I just finished on page 67 of your packet. I read that section of the code about nonconformings.
Right.
So now I'm going back to the staff report, and that begins on page 32 of your packet.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So on page 32 of your packet, it's a 5-page report. There are 3 sections of the code that are being requested to be varied. So the applicant, Mr. Rosenko, on behalf of Garden Street Office Retail Complex, the owner, is requesting 3 variances to the City of Land Development Regulations, specifically to section 28-314C, intensity and dimensional standards to the rear. The variance request is to allow less than the minimum required 25-foot rear yard setback. The next variance is to section 30-332A. Required landscape yard type establishes when a landscape yard is required for differing land use intensities. I just described that section of the code, those 2 tables, landscape tables I just referred to. Only the proposed development or redevelopment shall be required to provide the buffer. In a platted, so I won't read the rest here. The applicant shall install the type of landscape yard indicated in the required landscape yard type table, which I just described to you. I showed that to you. The variance request is to allow no landscape yard in lieu of a minimum 20-foot landscape yard. So the applicant is specifically asking for a 100% waiver of a landscape yard along Orange Street. The third request is to section 28-314C. Intensity and dimensional standards, side interior. The variance request to allow less than the minimum required 10-foot interior side setback. So this is to grant a variance to an existing nonconformity. The property, again, is located at 1225 Garden Street, Unit 3 specifically, 1227, 1229, and 1231. Those are the addresses of the property. The future land use in the property, again, as I mentioned, is downtown mixed use, and again, it operates as an overlay in this case. The zoning of the property is community commercial, CC. North of the property, across the street from Garden Street, is also community commercial. South of this property, across the street from Orange Street, is an urban mixed-use zoning. And in fact, that property on the opposite side of Orange Street, the applicant received a permit for a conditional use permit to allow for an off-site parking lot there. East of this property also has a community commercial zoning, and just west of this property across from Granis also has a community commercial. So along our Garden Street, primarily everything there in that segment of the road is community commercial, retail. The lot is rectangular in shape with 3 frontages on public rights-of-way. The use is retail and commercial businesses are located on the property. So I've already, in the previous agenda item, read out or summarized the criteria you're supposed to utilize in reviewing each of these variance requests, so I won't repeat that again. So I'll go to page 34 of your packet, and I'll summarize the analysis. So the purpose of this variance for the building addition is to allow an enclosed stairwell to be permitted for construction at the rear of Unit 1A, southwest corner of the office building. According to the applicant, the purpose of the stairwell is for life safety purposes. So our understanding is the property owner would like, or the applicant would like to finish out an interior. I guess they're finishing out the interior of the building. I'm not sure of the specifics of what they're trying to fill it out for or what they're doing in there, but they received a permit from the building department already for a stairwell inside the existing footprint of the building. But now the applicant is asking to, where they had originally proposed to put that stairwell inside the existing footprint of the building, to now have that relocated outside of the existing footprint of the building and have a new building addition, so that they can have more space to use inside the existing footprint for whatever purposes they're doing. So a building permit was issued for a stairwell to be located within the existing building footprint. The applicant subsequently submitted an application for a variance to allow a building addition. So that's what's being requested today. The applicant is proposing to relocate the stairwell into the building addition. The building addition will encroach into the rear yard setback and the landscape yard, which I've already described, that 20-foot landscape yard. If the variance is approved, the building permit will be amended. So the applicant has indicated to us that they will come back, if variance is approved for this building addition, that they will go back to the building department and amend their approved permit to allow now for this stairwell to be relocated outside the building footprint with this building addition. I hope that was clear. I know there are a lot of moving parts in this application. Okay, so I'll describe our analysis here on each of the requests. So we broke it out here into 2 different parts in the staff report. There's the building addition, variances related to the building addition, and then there are variances related to the existing building configuration. So what I'm going to describe right now are variances related to the building addition. So the request to section 28-314C to allow less than the minimum required 25-foot rear yard setback for the building addition with the stairwell. The applicant requested this variance to allow for the building addition to encroach into the 25-foot rear yard setback. The staff believes that the new or proposed building expansion with interior stairwell itself will not expand beyond an existing encroachment. So if you recall the image that I showed you, the survey, where the existing building encroach footprint right now bumps out into the setbacks along Orange Street, the building addition with the stairwell will not encroach beyond that any further. So we didn't see any concern with that. And also the applicant has indicated that in order to finish out the interior of the building, they would like to have this addition so that they can move the stairwell there. We also didn't see any issue with that as well. The next part of this request related to the building addition is to section 30-332A to allow no landscape yard in lieu of a minimum 20-foot landscape yard on a public right-of-way. The applicant requested this variance to allow for the building addition to encroach into the 20-foot landscape yard. The staff believes that the new or proposed building expansion with interior stairwell itself will not expand beyond an existing encroachment. That's true. However, I will explain later in our recommendations that we don't agree with waiving 100% the 20-foot landscape yard requirement, but we do agree, or have no objection to, rather, the encroachment into that 20-foot landscape yard. So the next part of the staff report, beginning on page 35 of your packet, I'll address the variance requests that are related to the existing building configuration. So the purpose of the variance for the existing building is to make the existing building encroachments in that configuration that I explained to you on one of the drawings, bring them into conformance with the code. The building was constructed in 1978 in its current footprint. The property was rezoned to community commercial in 1993. The building configuration is currently therefore non-conforming. So again, it's just grandfathered there. The existing building already encroaches into the interior side and rear yard setbacks and into the landscape yard on a public right-of-way, Orange Street. The applicant stated that the building was constructed over 40 years ago in its current location. The non-conforming issues were not created by the current owner. New development or redevelopment of the site should conform to the CC zoning district development standards. That's our opinion. And that's based on the non-conforming section of the code that I referred to earlier. So to allow for the variances to bring the existing building configuration along Orange Street in conformance, it applies to three different parts of the code here. So to section 28-314C, to allow less than the minimum required 25-foot rear yard setback. The applicant requested this variance to make all of the existing building encroachments into the rear yard conforming. It is questionable whether a variance should be granted to bring the existing portions of the building into conformance. The staff is concerned that a variance granted to allow the existing building encroachments would allow the property to be rebuilt at the same configuration if the building is demolished. This would not be in harmony with the general purpose and intent and spirit of the ordinance. The reason why we say that is because when you look at that non-conforming section of the code that I read earlier, it asks us not to make new or expand non-conforming structures. So granting a variance here to allow for that configuration along Orange Street to just be in conformance with the code, we believe would defeat the purpose of the code. So if the purpose of putting the property, changing the zoning on this property to CC with its rear yard setbacks and other setback requirements, granting this variance for a property that was developed prior to that zoning would defeat the purpose of rezoning it to CC. And that's our opinion. To grant to section 30-332A, this is the landscape requirement, a 20-foot landscape yard on a public right-of-way. The applicant requested this variance to make all the existing building encroachments into the landscape yard conforming. It is questionable whether a variance should be granted to bring the remaining existing portions of the building into conformance. This would not be in harmony with the general purpose, intent, and purpose of the ordinance. And then to the side interior, the 10-foot interior side yard requirement. The applicant requested this to remove and make the existing building encroachment into the side yard conforming. Again, it is questionable whether this is necessary, and we, again, do not believe it is consistent with the general purpose, intent, and spirit of the ordinance. So our recommendation is thus. To the building addition. The city has no objection to the building addition with the stairwell. The variance granted could be considered the minimum variance that would make possible reasonable use of the structure. If the board is inclined to approve the variance, then a condition should be included limiting the variance to the existing building. New development or redevelopment of the site should conform to the zoning development standards. So again, if the building is demolished, it'd have to be rebuilt at the current zoning standards is what we're saying. So approval of this, we would have no objection to approval of this bump out to the existing building. The staff does not support allowing no landscape yard. But we have no objection that if the landscape yard is so in other words, when you consider that portion of the variance, I would suggest that you consider whether there should be, you want to grant the variance to allow 100% no landscape yard or not. If you grant that, then there's no consideration as to whether this bump out is, or this addition is encroaching into anything, because you've just eliminated that. However, if you deny that portion of the request, so in other words, you disagree with the applicant that there should be a landscape yard there, then the next question is, how much of an encroachment should you allow? As far as the existing building configuration, the variance request is not required. The code requires new development or redevelopment of the site to conform to the zoning development standards. So again, if the building is demolished, it should be built to the current standards. Approval of the variance will allow the structure to be reconstructed in the same configuration if destroyed. If the board is inclined to approve the variance, then a condition should be included limiting the variance to the existing building configuration. And this is true with the encroachment into the 20-foot landscape yard along Orange Street, and also true with the encroachment into the 10-foot interior side yard setback. With that, I'll try and answer any questions you have about this. I know this is a very difficult and complicated one. We tried to keep those at a minimum to you. And also, Mr. Zanka is here to answer any questions as well.
So are we going to have to vote on all 5 of these items? Is that what you're saying?
I would recommend that when you get to the point where you decide whether there should be a waiver to grant the request to waive 100% of the 20-foot landscape yard, and you grant it, then it actually eliminates one of the requests, basically, because it makes the other request, whether there should be an encroachment in that landscape yard, moot. So it really depends what your actions, how your actions go forward.
Just for a little bit greater direction, if you look on page 1 of the staff report, page 32, there are 3 requests for variances, so I don't imagine that there would be more than 3 motions made. And it depends on how you all discuss these items and what you wish to do with it. We can talk more after the applicant has her presentation.
It's on page 31,
32.
32. Okay. Any other questions of staff?
Do you have any plans the way they were approved from, by the city at that time?
We did not locate the plans, but we did find code language from back at that time that would have been utilized, we believe, for the approval of the development.
Was there any setback or landscape buffer required at the time?
We did not find a landscape buffer requirement. So let's say it might have existed at that time. We did find, and we also didn't find a building setback requirement other than certain uses. There was a reference to certain uses would have to be set back a certain number of feet from the center line of the roadway.
That's it, yeah.
That's what we found. So we didn't delve too any further than that to see what uses have certain setbacks, because it would become irrelevant, because what we see here today, we have to apply what the code and the zoning is on this property currently. But we can certainly do that. We can certainly provide more information and look into it to see if there's anything else that will come to light, if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, the aerials don't go back too far, and everything back to 1990, and this area was paved, completely paved. It was all parking. Now, if you want to add landscape to it, would the parking work?
That's a good question.
It's a simple, and it's existing today. They already started the construction. It seems like I passed by the place, and then they already demolished some of the area in the outside. They have it boarded up. They already have the opening to go into the stairway. Okay. So there must be some work being done. But the encroachment, that's the first step, is the encroachment to the south. You can't do that's part of an existing building. And that bump out is part of the original plan that were approved. I really, when I look at this variance, I say, why are we looking at the variance? I mean, it's not, it's just for conformity. That's the only reason. I'm not sure what type of landscape buffer you can actually ask them to do, and then you render the site unusable.
I would just say that the building is existing on the property. It is a non-conforming structure, and if you were inclined to grant any variances, you have the ability to condition that it relates only to the existing structure, and should this existing structure or the amenities at this property be removed, then the site would have to comply with the current code, and that would be a condition that you would add that would be different from a typical variance application.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've had a business that I'm associated with in that location. You take away any more of the parking lot, they're gonna get rid of the angle that's just side. And even, well, they needed more parking even before they take away 10 feet or 20 feet. And like you say, I wish, why are we even here? This existing building is there. I guess we're just setting it up for insurance purposes or resale in the future or whatever happens, so there's not a problem. I don't know. But, yeah,
But one of the things that you actually brought up to the table on another project is to have the parking back up into the roadway in Orange Street. I think that's a typical site that you can do that, you know, and then you can create some landscape, but you can't create it within the right of way. You create it around the building. And that might be a solution, you know, to what you are looking at. But we need to look at it and get it to the table when you are talking at the early stages of putting the application together, not today, you know. You know what I'm saying? Just, it's like it's an existing system. That's my biggest concern. It's an existing building. We can't superimpose too many things on an existing pavement that has been there for, 30 years, so.
and I like the idea of having an outside stairwell for exit purposes
Yeah.
from the building. I mean, right now, it's just the front of the building.
And I would add also, I mean, being in an existing building, it wasn't constructed at the time with the idea that it was in conformance, I would assume. At the time it was built based on the zoning in effect at that time. The fact that later the city changed that zoning to now, according to those zoning rules, made it non-conforming, that doesn't seem to me part of the issue with the building itself.
Okay, let's keep it to questions for staff right now. If we have questions, and then we'll hear from the applicant before we have more discussion, if that's all right. All right. Any other questions of staff then? Okay, we'll open up the public hearing, and we have a card.
Yes, Kim Ranzinka.
Welcome.
Hi. Kim Rosenka, law firm of Cantwell and Goldman. I'm here representing Garden Street Office Retail Complex LLC. I did not know what you had. I made big copies. Would those be helpful, or do you have what you have on your computer screen good enough? This is the site plan and shows what we're trying to do. You're good with what you have on the computer?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am.
All right.
Thank you.
When I was at city council, they couldn't get it big enough for what they were, it wasn't this, but it was another one. So I've just learned that sometimes the computers aren't great. This has been difficult for, I think, both Mr. Parrish and I. We've talked a lot. And it's morphed over time because originally the owner purchased this a couple years ago. And what they wanted to do was put an exterior stairwell, an open stairwell, and the Florida Building Code just wouldn't allow it. So we went through a lot of discussion. I even called the Florida Building Commission to find out. So what they want to do is they want to modernize this building. So what they really want to do is there's two interior stairwells and an elevator. They want to take one of the stairwells out and put it on the exterior. So you're exactly right. There'll be one to the south and then one coming out the front. So it is somewhat of a fire evacuation life safety issue, but it's also just modernizing the building. When you modernize the building by taking out a stairwell inside, you're going to have more square footage. So this actually is increasing density in a way. And so also adding to that back area, which this is page 50 in your book, we provided it. When you add to that area, you're increasing square footage of the building. So you're making it more non-conforming in my opinion. So what I thought I needed to do was make the entire site conforming so we could add more square footage. That was the process here. We don't really care how we get where we get. You just want to be able to do the enclosed stairwell. So, work with Mr. Parrish if we need to just limit it to this new area, and if the building is destroyed, then it all goes away. We're fine with that. We're just trying to work within your code. Every code is different. As you've seen, Mr. Parrish cited you here, there, and everywhere. I just think with your non-conforming structure ordinance, that we can't build this because it's non-conforming. If they're saying we can build it even though it's non-conforming, we're okay with that. I think that's in the record. That's in their staff report. This is a 19,000 square foot building. It's composed of 4 units. And as I said, it's old. It's over 40 years old. And so the new owner is trying to make it more rentable. You may notice it's not all rented out. I believe it was conforming when it was built. Certainly it doesn't meet the setbacks now to the south or to the east. And so when you add that structure, that new stairwell structure is going to be 5'8" from the Orange Street setback. That number may be necessary for you when you're calculating the variance you want to give. So that's it. Also, too, with the landscape buffer, I mean, if you look at the back of it, this is in your packet, I believe it's page 55, there's no room for landscape. So we're asking for a 0 landscape buffer because generally when you increase density to a unit, you have to add landscaping. We don't have any way to put landscaping, not to mention there's stairs and there's a loading dock and everything else that I'm assuming vehicles pull right up to. So that was the reasons for the setbacks. And at first, we also thought we had asked for a 4th variance for projection, but we don't need that based upon the change of what's going on. So regarding the rear setback, the idea was to make it conforming, because as you've seen, the structures already that are there, the tower for the elevator and the storage areas, they're 1.2 feet from the back of Orange Street, from the setback to Orange Street. So the idea is we asked for a 23-foot, 10-inch setback to the property setback for the building to make the building conforming. Same with the east setback. We asked for a 9-foot, 6-inch variance from the east setback to make the building conforming. As to the landscape yard, same thing. We don't have a landscape backyard. If it's 20 feet, we can't make 20 feet, especially we're only 1.1 foot, 2 inches from the property line. So those are the 3 variances and the reasons why we have sought those variances. Again, if you want to grant just the variances for this new structure, I believe the staff has opined, and I'm assuming they've run it by council, that's fine as well. So however we get to where we construct this to modernize the building, to allow more options for ingress and egress, we would appreciate those variances. Again, the applicant did not create this. It was built back in 1978, must have been conforming at the time. It's a solid building. It will be there a long time. I don't anticipate it's going to be torn down. It's been through several hurricanes already. And I think probably other weather issues. But so with that, I would ask you grant all 3 variances that we've requested, but we understand if you're not comfortable with that, and go as staff recommends. We're fine however you want to proceed. We just ask that you allow this exterior stairwell to be constructed.
Are there questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have no other cards, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Have to do it, it's on TV. All right, so we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion or questions of staff.
Just one question from staff, if you would. This building is going to be 19,000 square feet. There's only like 25, 30 parking spaces. You need 70 or more. So how would that be? I'm surprised that's not part of the variance.
We only required to address the variance related to the building addition. Now, the applicant asked to get variances for the rest of the rear there and the side. They could certainly ask for variances of other portions of the code as well, but they haven't done that. But that's not something we're going to require, because what's necessary in order to get that addition on there is related to just that rear yard setback and that landscape setback. So that's what staff would look at. The other ones we just didn't think were necessary at this point. They're already grandfathered. They're non-conforming. They just continue on as is.
So if they are non-conforming, they are grandfathered, so why is it coming in front of us?
The applicant asked for those other variances.
Yep. The applicant is entitled to ask for variances that the staff may not deem necessary, which I believe is the case today.
That helps.
Okay. All right. I kind of agree with Sid. It's an existing building. It's there. I like the idea of a stairwell out there, so I'm inclined to vote yes, yes, yes. So that's just me.
Well, I'm kind of reflect what Sid had mentioned. I mean, the footprint of this building with the bump out doesn't change. And I don't really see an issue personally with that. And I don't really see how I don't see how this building could become compliant with the current code on the landscape aspect. I mean, short of tearing up all that pavement and having no parking. I mean, it just doesn't seem realistic. I'm not sure. I would guess, to me, so I guess I'm still struggling with what you'd mentioned, Sid, about what is it we're actually giving a variance for? I mean, the building is here. What we're basically saying is that, and it didn't sound like they actually needed a variance to move the stairs to the outside. Is that correct?
Yes, they did.
That's what's being requested here,
Okay.
yes.
But they've added the landscape to it.
That's okay. That's the part I definitely was a little puzzled.
If we, counsel, if we actually, we don't look at the variance for the buffers, for the landscape buffer, or the only thing we look at is the variance to the setback.
Yeah.
Yes, staff requires a variance to the encroachment in order to issue the development order
right.
for the requested proposed stairwell that's going to continue to encroach in the landscape yard, which without the variance would be prohibited because it's enlarging an existing structure. Staff does not, as far as I can tell, require a landscape or buffer variance for this project.
Let me clarify. So if you look on page 35 of your packet, again, we broke it out two parts here. So there are two variances that are sections of the code that are relevant to the building addition. That is the rear yard setback and the landscape yard requirement for the building addition, for the stairwell. So in order to allow for the building addition, those two sections of the code have to be varied in some way. For the existing building, which is further down on page 36 of your packet, for the existing building configuration and the side setback, again, there are three sections of the code that are relevant to that part of their request. So the existing building configuration outside of the building addition, just the existing building configuration along Orange Street, you have those two same sections of the code relevant here. You have the rear yard setback and the landscape yard requirement. But then they're also adding on the interior side setback as well for the existing building configurations. And that's that third part of the request right here. You see number 5 on page 36 of your packet. Those three right here where it talks about the existing building configuration, we see that they're just existing already. They're non-conforming, so we don't see them as necessary. If the building is destroyed back there, we would recommend that the city, that the redevelopment of this property be consistent then in conformance with the current code in place at that time. That's the purpose of the rezoning. Now, if you disagree with that and approve the variances as requested here, then what you're saying is that back there, is already encroaching, allow them to bring it in conformance, basically, with approval of variances. That's something you could do, and I think that's what the applicant's asking for.
I think as council came up with a very good suggestion, which is we can approve the variance, but if this structure disappears or, then the variance would go away with it, and then they have to comply with the new code.
If you approve those variances that way with that kind of condition, I think we kind of generally described here, yes, that would
Would
be
be
the
the
case.
same thing, except,
Otherwise, if you just give a blanket variance, then what you're saying is that setback runs with the land, basically.
okay.
So they could redevelop to
I think
that.
that's a
Yeah.
good approach.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Before we look at council and say, what? So we go back to page, what was that, 32? Were the three sections there? 314, or I don't know.
Which page?
32 of your packet.
Yeah, page 32, you got 1, 2,
three
and 3. You
sections.
got 3 sections. Is that the way you interpreted, Counselor? We need to look at those 3 sections on page 32. It spills over to 33.
Numbers 1 and 3 are the same sections, talking about both the rear and side interior. It's up to the board to determine if any comment is necessary on that side interior.
Oh.
Under the analysis, the side interior is not discussed under the building addition. You have just 1 and 2. Under the existing building configuration, 3, 4, and 5 mirror 1, 2, and 3 on page 31. So that is the applicant's request under existing building configuration, and staff's recommendation would follow under the building addition recommendation.
All right. I'm sorry. I got lost.
I'm on page 35.
You're on 35 now. Okay. That's,
The recommendation for a building addition
oh, down at the bottom. Okay.
relates to the first variance request. The first variance request is for section 28-314C.
Yeah.
To allow less than the minimum required 25-foot setback for the rear of the property.
Correct.
If I may, on that section there, you have a choice. You can approve or deny this variance in whole, basically for the entire rear, including that addition, or you go break it up. So in other words, you could say, we'll only address just the building addition right now first, and then address the rear building configuration separate. You could do that. But if your motion is to approve the encroachment into the 25-foot rear yard setback as requested, then you're including the existing building configuration plus the additional building addition, rather.
Okay.
So I would look at that first, and then,
Go to the next one.
yeah, that's my recommendation, but that's up to you. So.
We can always add the caveats to the,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And I would like that too, because then, if the building goes away, then they have to meet the actual code.
Well, if you understand it, would you like to make a motion, sir?
Okay, let me attempt to make the motion. Okay.
With modifications, okay.
Let me go back to see what the variance is.
7-2019.
So we're starting with the building addition?
You can, in your motion, it can include the existing building configuration and the building addition at same motion. So you're granting variances for all of that at one time. You could do that.
Okay.
Or you could break it up.
I don't want to break it
Okay.
up. Just-
No, please don't.
Okay. I move to approve variance number 7-2019 for the rear building addition of 25 feet to be concurrent with the existing building. And if the building is removed or changed, replaced, then the whole property should follow the code, City of Titusville code. That's my motion.
Just to clarify your motion, so This is to the building addition only, or to the building addition and the existing configuration?
And the existing
Okay.
configuration, yeah.
So your motion would cover it would sunset also if the building were substantially remodeled. In other words, not replaced, but,
Remodeled, yeah.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
actually.
Exterior.
yeah, right. The footprint changed dramatically,
Right.
yes, right, yes.
Would they have to come back to the Board of Adjustment? Okay. Do we need to repeat the motion? or-
Is that an amendment to include remodeled or destroyed?
I just wanted to include your language, the one that you had.
Just to clarify on that, so the code in the non-conforming section talks about if the building is destroyed by 50% or more of the assessed value, then you have to bring it back into current conformance as far as the current zoning district, the standards. So that's what the current code says. So your condition could be that if replaced, I think that could be fairly understood unless anybody else, council has a different recommendation of a certain term. But replaced, that to be would indicate to us that the building's destroyed, would apply that section of the code to say if it's going to be replaced or destroyed 50% more of assessed value according to the code, then it would have to meet the current code standards. So I think the word replaced is understandable to us.
I think you just put a number on my subjective terminology of substantial when you said 50%.
Right. I'm sorry, I didn't read further down in the code, but on that page 67 of your packet, I only read the first part of that section. It talks about structure not in conformance to the code, shouldn't be expanded. There's another section just below that talks about how do you apply that. And it says a structure not in conformance with the code shall not be rebuilt or repaired after damage exceeding 50% of the assessed value of the structure on the date of the damage as determined and maintained by the Brevard County Property Appraiser's Office. That's the threshold we use in the code.
Thanks.
Okay.
Here's what I have. Member Chehab made a motion to approve variance number 7-2019 for the rear building addition and existing building configuration to encroach into the 25-foot rear setback unless the building is destroyed or remodeled. I did not hear a second.
I'll second.
Now that we understand it, yes, okay. So we've had a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
Before, I would take out the word remodeled because that, according to us, has a different interpretation.
Yes.
So replaced is understandable.
Will your motion still hold?
Yes, my
Yes.
motion is.
Motion,
Yes, and the second holds.
all right. Okay. May we have roll call, please?
Member Johnson?
Yes,
Alternate Member Kilpatrick? Yes. Chairman Taylor?
Yes?
Vice Chairman Shahab?
Yes.
Okay. So we did those two. Now, do we still need to address the third item or fifth or sixth, whatever?
So you dealt with the rear yard setback.
Yes.
The next one I would recommend is the rear or the landscape requirement along Orange Street. That's on page,
For this, I'd look to page 36, number 2 and 4.
2 and 4. Oh, you're jumping around, okay. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve those two sections?
I have a quick question from staff. Just how does the landscape requirement, okay, on something like this, a project like this, how is it comes to life?
thought you might ask. So the city has two site plan applications or site plan approval processes. So we typically have a class 1 and a class 2, and Mr. Sharif, you know how that works or how going through that process. But a class 1 A Class 2 process is really a full-on engineered site plan. You have to put on the stormwater. We're looking at everything. Everything has to be brought into conformance. You're redeveloping the site, possibly. A Class 1 is a little bit different. It's like, say, for example, you're just restriping your parking lot, or you're adding a few spaces to it, or you're adding a small addition to your building that's less than 1,000 square feet. That's just not significant to trip a lot of other things, the requirements that be in there. So typically with something like that, depending on what it is, we'll apply the code in a reasonable way just to that area where it's being impacted on the property. So for example, a parking lot that's being restriped and you have additional spaces being added to it, we'll generally just look at that area where that about the parking lot and see how you can apply other parts of the code, such as landscaping, where those additional spaces are being put in, or where the parking lot's being restriped. What can be done? And there's a section of the code that talks about that allows the administrator to kind of work with the applicant on those issues. So in this particular case, I would think that if there was a site Class 1 permit, for example, submitted to us, and we were going to have to impose in some fashion the landscape requirement, it'd be very difficult in this situation. I would say probably would be maybe perimeter or maybe building landscaping if possible. But as you can see in the photographs here, that's going to be difficult no matter what. As the applicant's already indicated to you, the building itself in the back in some parts is only just above a foot away from the property line. And it's hard to impose any kind of other landscaping requirements in the public right-of-way. And there's a significant part of the public right-of-way that is not paved between the property line and the pavement of the road. So there's not a lot of room there. So to answer your question, I'm not sure exactly how we would do it in this particular situation. It would be difficult.
You could get in the situation of competing nonconformances, because if you insist that certain landscape buffer requirements are met and it's to the detriment of parking, and yet there are parking requirements for parking spaces for a number of units and structures, then you wouldn't meet that because you've had to comply with the landscape requirement. So it seems to me that in some cases with these existing structures, there really isn't there's not a clear answer.
If there's no further discussion, or would anybody like to try to make a motion? I'm glad I don't have to do that. Somebody else is. Question is how to word it.
Again, you could use the same language. But you could decide to only address the building addition encroachment into this landscape yard, or combine it with the existing building configuration, like you did the last motion.
The thing about this is, although we are just conceding to the fact that this doesn't have any landscaping, and if it comes back in front, something happens and comes back, they have to do landscaping. But right now, there's no way they can do it.
Which it kind of is what we were talking about earlier. It's almost, it's a little ironic to be discussing a variance in a way, for this situation, because, that it's just what it is. There isn't really anything the applicant can do about it, or...
Well, maybe they feel more comfortable conforming, like a non-conforming, is giving a variance to a non-conforming site.
Okay. Anybody feel comfortable making any kind of motion?
Again, this request is right now about eliminating the 20-foot landscape buffer. So whether you agree with that or not, that would be your motion. And whether it should be applicable only to the addition or to the whole building on the rear there. And again, if you approve it, you could condition it, as you did last time, to the building that's there now.
It's just the wording of something like this. I don't know how to allow it because it's not necessary, right? I mean, is it necessary to do anything?
Well, right now, it is for the building addition at the minimum.
Well, we did that for the building
You
addition.
did that with the rear setback.
Rear setback.
That's
So
correct.
We'll do that for the building addition then.
Right, so you did that for the rear setback for the building addition plus the existing configuration of the rear building. So now it's approval of that variance allows that addition and the existing configuration to encroach into that 25-foot rear yard setback for a building. Now the next variance request is about the landscape yard. And the request is to eliminate it completely.
Yes.
I have a suggested motion.
Please.
This board recommends, perhaps, if you do not want to give a variance to the landscape yard, but to allow the encroachment, that you deny the variance request to allow no landscape yard adjacent to Orange Street and approve the variance request to allow only the proposed building addition with the enclosed stairwell to encroach into the required landscape yard, which would be the minimum variance necessary to permit the construction of the stairwell at the southwest corner of the existing structure.
I think that's a good suggestion. And it doesn't take anything away from what they are trying to do. And you know, basically if anything happens with the structure, then they have to comply with the code.
So under this circumstance, with this language, they come back for their interior or whatever, not going to come back now and say, no, you got a 20-foot setback?
But with the motion that Chelsea described to you, basically says that you're keeping a landscape buffer. But now you're allowing them to, so in other words, you're denying their request to eliminate it 100%. But now that it's there, you're just allowing them to encroach into it. And with the condition, like you did last motion, that if the building is destroyed, they have to rebuild it to the current standards.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a little bit different. I think it's a little bit different because then they're still non-conforming.
Yeah.
No matter what they do with right now, they're still non-conforming. But if we do the motion the way we did it before, probably they will be conforming for the life of the building until it's gone. This building is going to be there forever, I think, because it's a
Prefab, yes.
prefab concrete, you know, like, yeah, prefab structure. So
Does anybody agree with the counselor's wording? In the form of a motion? I can't make it.
I'd like to, change it a little, just make it conforming with the original, with the one that we did before. At least gives them some flexibility, but it doesn't give them too much flexibility either. So, because this item is going to come up again, but it should run with the building, I think. That's my feeling. So
The language of your last motion stated at the end of it, if building is destroyed or replaced, then it should be built according to current zoning or current standard requirements. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that what you read, Chelsea, as well? Okay. That was the condition you tied to the last motion.
Yeah, I don't want to have any more encroachments, into the setbacks. It's the existing building configuration with the addition of the stairway. That would be my motion, to approve the existing building with the additional stairway and eliminate the setback as it exists today. Eliminate the landscape buffer as it exists today. Consistent with what it exists today.
So it sounds like what you're saying is don't eliminate the landscape yard, but allow them to have that encroachment based on the current configuration and the addition.
Right.
Okay. All right. So that's consistent with Chelsea's recommended language for a motion.
But I think what I'm saying is the landscape, we are giving them the variance to the existing landscape, because there's no landscape today. That's what we're saying, right?
So back to the question you had about whether it can we even apply a code in any situation here to put landscaping back there?
Can't,
I think that's why the applicant's asking, just eliminate that right now. But you could have the condition, as you did in the last motion, that says that the property's rebuilt, then they have to bring in conformance. So in other words, it just runs with the building and not with the land.
Yeah.
Okay.
Say
So,
that.
so it sounds like you recommend to eliminate the landscape yard as requested by the applicant for the
Eliminate,
building, basically.
Eliminate the landscape yard as requested by the applicant.
Okay.
And no more encroachments other than what's existing. What's
Okay,
actually
all right.
proposed, no more encroachment other than the stairway.
Well, eliminating the landscape yard, that question becomes moot as far as encroachment then. And the only question about encroachment is really about rear yard setbacks to the building.
And we already have that covered.
Yeah, and you've already covered that. So if you get rid of the landscape yard, a question as to whether anything encroaches into a landscape yard, it doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. So eliminating the 20-foot landscape, so the motion would be to eliminate the 20-foot landscape yard setback and consistent with the original motion.
Existing structure.
Okay, and we'll add that. So eliminate the 20-foot landscape yard as requested by the applicant with the caveat or the condition here that if the building is destroyed or replaced, then it should be built according to current zoning requirements.
That's it.
Okay.
I think, I don't think we can ask for more than that,
Will that cover all our requests pretty well? She's looking hard.
We haven't dealt with this. We have one more motion after this.
All right, so let's get this out of the way.
Okay.
All right, have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shahayam,
Yes.
Alternate Member Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Chairman Taylor.
Yes. All right, so now what have we not dealt with?
Just to clarify, that motion was for the building addition and the configuration of the existing building. So that's both together. Okay.
Yes. Okay,
Third one is the interior side yard setback, and that is on,
interior side?
yeah, that on page 36 of your packet, you'll see that number 5, that's the last variance request. The applicant is requesting that the building footprint as it stands today encroaches into that required 10-foot interior side yard setback requirement. And so the applicant is asking for that to be approved as well.
That's the one that has like a double wall, right? And like
If you look on
it's
page,
on the east side, right?
look on page 49 of your packet and you'll see the drawing. It's the side of the property that does not face a right-of-way. It faces their neighbor.
Okay,
But donut shop. We're all getting hungry.
okay. I mean, you can't do anything there anyway. I mean, I don't know, I don't.
It's going to make the building conforming.
Oh,
So again, this could be, you could agree with the request and just bring it in conformance. It runs with the land, or you could have that caveat like you had in the past two motions where it's really tied to the building only.
right, okay.
Or it could be denied and it just sits there as is, so.
So either way, it's going to still be there, so.
All right, if I don't hear a motion, I'm just going to say we're just going to sit there.
I'm waiting for
You're waiting for him to look one more time. Okay.
Mr. Johnson.
As they say on page 36, the variance is not a required variance, it's just one that's being requested.
Our opinion, again, is, like in the last ones, is it's grandfathered, it's non-conforming. You're going to destroy it, it should be brought up to code. That's, so that the administration's supposed to be administrating the code and applying it in that way.
If it's destroyed more than 50%.
And you could approve this with that caveat like you did the last time, too. It's the same.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Here we go. Doing it, no?
I can't do it. I can't make a motion. Chairman. I read the rules.
You could pass the gavel if you're so inclined.
Oh,
Love for you to do it, you know?
just
Oh, my God.
just say yes.
Just need to see it, you know, so.
It applies to that, which isn't there. So.
What is it?
I have a question of staff here, because again, you have the language in here that basically says the variance is not required, so were it denied, what effect would it actually have?
So, I mean, if it's approved, I mean, if you don't, if the applicant withdraws this request for that particular variance, it just continues on as where it is right now, that building footprint. We can't go in there and ask them to move the wall. But if you approve it, just a blanket request, then what happens is that becomes the new setback on that property, and it runs with the land. So if it gets the building gets demolished, they can rebuild to the approved setback.
Yeah, and that's what we did not want to do.
Correct.
And if the issue is denied, as you asked, the result would be that the applicant would not have the right to come back and ask for that variance again.
So we can actually approve the variance with the same condition as we did before.
You could.
You have that option.
See, what really happened is, that, you know, there was a building here in town where the applicant, he didn't destroy the whole building. He destroyed part of the building, and then to go back to the property line or to the building, to the side of the building, as much as possible, you know? Although his setback was a lot more, but he didn't destroy the whole building. So he kept the walls up. So,
You went way over 50%.
Yeah.
Way over 50%.
No, but I don't mind going to the point of where, we need this building to actually be a successful building too. And it's been sitting there for a long time and there wasn't that much action to it. So this might help out a little bit, so I would move let me do the motion.
Thank you.
You guys, let me see, what page is it on? I get lost here.
Page 36 of your packet is the recommendation on that particular variance, number 5.
Okay.
If you want to go read the section, that's on page, starting on page 32 of your packet, number 3 there.
Number 3 down?
Yeah. And it runs on to the next page here. So the request is to allow less than the minimum required 10-foot interior side yard setback.
But if I go
With
to
your-
number 5, that's the one that
That-
talks about the motion, right?
Yeah, I mean, that right there addresses it. So you could, if you want to repeat the same motion, you could say, like you did last time, approve the variance request to allow less than the minimum required 10-foot interior side yard setback, with the caveat, like you said last time, that if the building is destroyed or replaced, then it should be built according to current zoning requirements.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the variance to section 28-314C to allow less than the minimum required 10-foot interior side yard setback, with the caveat that if the building is destroyed or demolished, it has to follow the current COT standards.
Okay, so what that does then, if you approve that motion on page 49 of your packet, you'll see that configuration, and you'll see the building, a corner of the building, northeast corner of the building touches or just almost touches that property line. It's less than a foot. So what you're saying, less than 10 feet, you're allowing basically a 0 setback. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm not sure when it's going to be replaced or changed or, or demolished.
It won't be in our lifetime.
And it won't
Okay.
be.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, may we have a roll call, please?
Vice Chairman Shahan?
Yes.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Yes,
Aldermember Kirkpatrick?
Yes.
All right. Hey, congratulations. Let's see, where do I go now? Back to the top. Okay, so that ends our 2 variances for tonight. Now we have no public, so we won't ask for petitions from the public unless councilor wishes to speak more. No, she said no. Okay, reports. We have a semi-annual report to be handed over to City Council, I believe. Is that correct? It's in our packet.
You have a report that needs to go to City Council twice a year, and so what's attached on page 69 of your packet is a summary of actions that you completed. Well, and some of them, these are all the applications. We threw everything in here, including ones that were withdrawn.
Oh, some were withdrawn? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And we provided additional information about them to get, because before I think we had very generalized information about, this is application number such, and you did this action on it. It didn't really tell a story. So we put some more information to kind of describe what each of those applications were and what your actions were. So this is a little bit more detailed than usual. So with your approval, we'll forward this on to City Council.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the semi-annual report to go to the city council.
Second?
second.
All right. Had a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Member Johnson?
Yes,
Aldermember Kirkpatrick?
Yes.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shahan?
Yes.
Very good. All right. So that takes care of the business part. Now we're down to, I'll get there eventually. Okay, it just says reports, but hey, do we have anything from staff to enlighten us on?
You do have an agenda item for the October meeting. That's October 23rd at 6 PM. We have 2 variances and an appeal that will come before you that night. And we also are going to request of you that night to decide as to whether you would be willing to cancel your December meeting or cancel your November meeting. In other words, combine your November and December meeting. And we are going to suggest, so you give you a heads up right now, I believe the 4th or the 11th, Kim, you'll have to correct me, but that's a Wednesday after Thanksgiving. So we'll bring those 2 options, or possibly even a Thursday for you as well, because some of those dates may conflict with other meetings.
4th or the 11th of December, right?
I believe actually the 4th is going to be a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. So now, and I'm thinking now the TEC, the Environmental Commission, is going to be on the 11th. So we may actually ask you for a Thursday night. The-
Brad, I
Go
think we were looking at either a Tuesday or a Thursday.
Tuesday
like
or Thursday?
Tuesday the
Okay.
3rd or Thursday the 5th
Okay.
or the
Thank you.
12th, something like that, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to give you a few options, and we may do, I think we may send you an email ahead of time, even ahead of that meeting, so you have a heads up. And then you'll need to make a decision at the October meeting about your subsequent meeting, your November, December meeting.
All right. Anything else, sir?
No, sir.
Counselor, anything to share with us?
Yes, just one update. You know that there are vacancies on this board, and they have been vacancies on this board for some time. The Board of Adjustment and Appeals has a vacancy for 1 regular member as well as 1 alternate member. We have vacancies on other boards, the Historic Preservation Board, the Municipal Code Enforcement Board, and the Titusville Environmental Commission, so you are not alone. However, it is a problem for city business. If we can't meet with a quorum, then we can't conduct business of our certain boards. So the city manager has taken an extra effort to educate all of our council members to try and recruit. And also the city clerk's office has an advertisement prepared for October 3rd to publish this information in the Florida Today so that we can try to recruit more volunteers to participate in this board. If anyone out in the public is listening, the Board of Adjustments and Appeals is in particularly looking for a licensed architect, engineer, landscape architect, surveyor, contractor, a building contractor, a person associated with the building trades industries, a person having an education degree, bachelor or master's in urban planning, a person with a current American Institute of Certified Planner certification, a person with a minimum of 10 years experience in land development, a person with a minimum of 10 years experience in urban planning field, and the alternate member may be a public at large individual with no expertise/experience in any of the areas that I just described.
And what is the time frame if someone made application that it takes? Because this does have to be approved by city council, is that correct?
So the application needs to be in 5 days prior to the council action. Council acts on applications that they've had on file for no less than 5 days. And so the next council meeting would be 2 weeks from yesterday in 13 days. So if there was any received in the next 8 days, they could be appointed at the next council meeting. So that's the timeline.
To be for our next meeting next month?
Our next meeting would require an appointment prior to that meeting.
Yes.
So at one of the October city council meetings, we could have an appointment. And there's 2 meetings, so
Yes, 2.
there's more than 8 days available for someone to apply to participate at that meeting. But we do need to get applications in so that they can be reviewed and approved by the city council.
Okay, so it's not a thing where the city council has to advertise it and go to the next meeting and stuff. They can just
We
do
need
it
to
right
have
at-
the application on file in order to proceed with an agenda item.
Yeah, okay, but it's not a first reading and a second reading.
No,
that kind of
nope.
stuff. Okay, good. That's good to hear. Yes, we are, I saw the city manager's email to all the people on the council requesting that they, I won't say strong arm, but somebody they might touch and say, thank you, or we need your help. If we know of anybody, if you think of anybody, if there's nothing else, tell me or let Brad know or let her know. We'll chase them down. Keep your name anonymous. So yes, we could use some help. it's bad to have agenda items continued and continued and continued. It does not look good for the city. Anything from the members?
I would just like to mention that I am very sorry that I had to unexpectedly miss the prior meeting, and apologize to staff and everyone for that unexpected absence.
All right. Well, am I going to see anybody tomorrow night? Anybody going to the luncheon? No? No? Dinner, the dinner. It's not a luncheon, no, it's a dinner. You going to go? All right, I got one. Sit. You didn't say.
Sorry, no. Thank you.
It's going to be a big dig.
I know.
Nice place, so. It's a nice place. My office is going to have their office party there too, so hey, it's a nice place. All right, well, seeing no other business to be talked about, we'll call this meeting adjourned.